And there are a lot of famous docs out there that are recommending this too. Dr. Perricone and Dr. Oz and Dr. whatever. They're all recommending fish oil. They're also selling fish oil. Okay? I don't sell fish oil. Okay, but the long-term consequences are not good. They're unsaturated. They're prone to oxidative stress. They're very fragile. Long-term use will increase oxidative stress, and they will deplete your antioxidants. By the way, I used to take fish oil. I used to recommend it. I don't do this anymore because I know better. Okay, because we're all susceptible to the hype. You read these things, how wonderful they are, and you go, oh my God, I want that. Well, it's not true. It is just a bunch of BS, basically. And I apologize if anybody feels insulted by the fact that I'm saying these things, but this is the truth. And you can look these things up. Go on Google and look up oxidative stress and fish oil or rancidification, and look at the biochemistry of this. Ask someone who knows biochemistry. They'll tell you, oh yeah, it's very fragile stuff. Okay, calcium. This is another biggie here. And I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but how many people in here are taking calcium because their doctor told them to? Okay, take 1,200 to 1,500 milligrams of calcium a day. Really? So the myth is that high dose of calcium is good for your bones. The reality is that a balance of several nutrients or minerals is needed for bone health, and these include calcium, silica, magnesium, zinc, manganese, copper, selenium, iodine, boron, and phosphorus. You need a mixture of minerals for your bones. If you take too much calcium by itself, it's not good for you. It can actually reduce your bone growth. So if an osteoporotic patient takes excessive calcium, and excessive is different in everybody, okay, it will actually inhibit what's called osteoblastic activity. Osteoblasts are cells that make bone. So let me just segue off here for a second. We have two sets of cells in our bones that are metabolically active. There's a set called the osteoblasts. They make bones. And there's a set called the osteoclasts. They break down bones. So the blasts are the good guys and the clasts are the bad guys, right? No. God gave us both sets for a reason. The bone is a living tissue. It needs to be recycled. We need to break down our bone to replace the old bone. So if you take too much of the calcium, it actually inhibits osteoblastic activity. The other reason I want to mention this is these drugs, all these biphosphonates, they work by blocking and killing the osteoclasts. So that's a good thing, right? Well, no.
Osteoclasts or the osteoblasts?
No, they inhibit osteoclastic activity. They inhibit the breakdown of bone. So your bone builds up. That's a good thing, right? Well, not necessarily, because now you have more and more bone, but you don't get rid of the old bone in there, and so your bones actually become weaker and weaker. Now, you've probably heard some of these stories about people getting side effects from these drugs. They get the osteonecrosis of your jaw. How is it possible that a drug that's good for your hip and your spine is bad for your jaw? That's not possible. Okay, now there's some reports coming out that people are getting pathological femur fractures on, and very, very strange fractures on these drugs. So you have to be very careful when you start playing games with your body chemistry. So if you take too much calcium, this will inhibit osteoblastic activity, and especially if you're deficient in magnesium. There were studies that have shown that if you give magnesium to patients, not calcium, it actually increases your bone density more than calcium. And I'm not recommending that you all take magnesium right now, but it's actually in some ways more important than calcium. This is a total myth. Now, it's true that most of our calcium is in our bones. That's where we store it. We're born and we grow and we have a certain amount of calcium, and like 98% of it is in our bones. That's where we store it. But that doesn't mean that if you take it by your mouth that it's going to go into your bones. Okay, this is very complex biochemistry involved. And there's a good chance if you take it, it's going to end up somewhere other than your bones. This is a whole nother talk. But let me tell you, as an emergency doctor, I can't tell you how many times I've had a patient come into the ER and they fell down and they hurt their back. And we get x-rays of their spine, and I put the x-ray up, and their spine has no calcium in it. It's totally decalcified. And right next to their spine, you see their aorta. We talked about the aorta before with the copper stuff. And their aorta is completely calcified. So what happened? The calcium left their bones and went into their soft tissues. They have a calcium metabolism problem, not a lack of metabolism, and not a lack of calcium. Osteoporosis is not a calcium deficiency disease. It's caused by a problem with calcium metabolism. Hormones are involved, other minerals, acid-base balance is very, very complex. Just throwing a bunch of calcium in there will not necessarily solve the problem. It could make it much, much worse. So excess calcium can interfere with bone mineralization. It does this by blocking the activity of magnesium and silica and other minerals required for strong bone. And I just want to use this as an example of how you have to sort of understand the body's entire chemistry to recommend things. For example, if the patient is excessively alkaline, when you give the calcium, it will not be deposited in the bone, but it will actually be in the soft tissues and nerves. And this is where you start to see people that have these calcified arteries. And this can actually contribute to arthritis, bone spurs, nervous twitches, muscle cramps, and insomnia. The excessive alkalinity causes the calcium to be bound to albumin. And these patients, they may have osteoporosis, but what they need is to reduce their alkalinity, not to give them more calcium. So you have to fix what's wrong. Patients have all sorts of imbalances. If you don't know what you're dealing with, just throwing things on there saying this is good for your bones is dangerous. There's some patients where their autonomic nervous system is out of whack. Okay? They may have excessive sympathetic tone. Calcium will activate your sympathetic nervous system. This can lead to insomnia, high blood pressure, fast heartbeats, constipation. These patients definitely need magnesium and not calcium. How many people have heard of calcium channel blockers? These are drugs. What do these drugs do? They lower your blood pressure. So if calcium channel blockers lower your blood pressure, what does calcium do? It raises your blood pressure. How? By activating your sympathetic nervous system. So you have these people taking calcium, and next thing you know, their blood pressure is going up, or they have constipation, or all sorts of side effects. And oftentimes, no one ever thinks it's the calcium causing their problem. You won't believe how many patients I have come to my office that are taking just boatloads of supplements. And the first thing I do is, well, stop taking all these. Let's clear the slate. Change your diet. Come back in a couple weeks. Let me start, check you out. And next thing you know, half their symptoms are better. They were poisoning themselves with their food and their supplements in an effort to be healthy. And if you take these things over a long period of time, you never know that these are the culprits, because they may make you feel well in the beginning, and after a while it could actually bother you. Let me just talk about that for 1 second. Let's say, how many people have had this experience? Let's say you had a deficiency. You took a supplement and you go, yeah, doc, for a while it really made me feel good. Because what happened is you replaced what you didn't have. Then you go, well, doc, then it seemed to stop working. It didn't stop working, just didn't need it anymore. Right? And people have had this experience, I'm sure. Oh, I took this for a while and it worked, and then it stopped working. These things don't stop doing what they do. You just may not need them anymore. So you got to be really careful. Okay, so I was talking about sympathetic tone and calcium supplementation. If you have insulin resistance, if you have type 2 diabetes, you probably have insulin resistance. This is where the problem where the insulin does not get into the cells. Well, calcium actually reduces your ability to get your sugar into your cells and your insulin in your cells. It increases insulin resistance. So if you have patients that have insulin resistance, give them too much calcium, it'll make this worse. They could get fatigued, depressed, their temperature will drop. These people need to reduce their insulin resistance, not supplement with calcium. So you need to fix what's wrong. If you have too much oxidative stress, we've talked about this many times, too many free radicals, excessive calcium will actually accelerate the aging process. It increases oxidative stress through its action on the sympathetic nervous system and other processes. It can contribute to skin aging, wrinkles, age spots, brain damage, dementia, calcium in the brain, susceptibility to autoimmune disease, hardening of the arteries. That's calcification of your arteries. We've all heard of these things, right? So you add too much calcium and excessive oxidative stress, and it will hurt the lining of your arteries. These people need antioxidants to improve their bone health, not extra calcium. So when I have a patient who's osteoporotic, I don't just start throwing vitamin D on them or throwing calcium. I look at them and go, okay, what is the patient's problem? Do they have imbalances in their body chemistry? Do they have excessive oxidative stress, too much not enough oxygen? Are they acidic? Are they alkaline? Do they have insulin resistance? Look at what's wrong rather than just treating the symptoms with supplements.